welcome back to the next installment in my intermediate stamping techniques series. I apologize for the delay on this one, you guys. I wanted to get this out sooner, but our family is in the midst of a move and everything fell together kind of quickly, and of course, you know, that there's lots to do and things that are kind of taking priority on my time. So and also, as I film this, I am not in my craft room because of that, because we're doing some packing, and so I'm filming in a different location. So I apologize if there's some shadows or if the lighting's not great, but I'm hopeful that because this is a technique video that you'll still get the point, and that it'll still be valuable to you even if the lighting and the circumstances aren't ideal. So thanks for being patient and forgiving with some of that. So what I want to talk about today is masking. This is another simple technique, and I guess I should go back and say, if you haven't seen part 1 of this video, or this series, excuse me, that one was focused on stamping off, or second generation stamping, which is a really great technique with lots of different applications for all kinds of projects. And this is another, you know, very similar, easy to do, simple technique, widely used, but sometimes it's nice to get the basics in one place and also to just have some ideas for how it can be applied in your planner. So I thought I'd put that all together here. So all masking is when you want to put ink on a page, but you don't want the ink to go everywhere. So whether you're stamping or whether you're applying ink with just a marker, or whether you're blending ink on with a blending tool, if you want to leave some areas of your page white and you don't want the ink to hit, then you want to mask that section off. So I will give you some examples. This is applicable for all inks. You can do this with pigment inks, dye inks, hybrid inks, and really all different kinds of paper. For my demonstration today, I'm just working on just some craft paper, nothing special. I think it's like a sketch pad that my kids have. And I'm using simple Post-it notes. And this will be what I use to mask off the areas of my page that I don't want to get ink on them. You can get specialty masking paper. Post-it actually makes paper on a roll, and I do have that as well. They also make larger sheets of masking paper that you can use, and you can punch images from that. These Post-its are only sticky on the edge here, like a standard Post-it, but they make full stick Post-it notes, which are great for this technique as well. So just experiment with the different supplies you want to use. What I'm going to do right now is just sort of use a handful of Post-it notes to create a box on my page. And this is something that if you use a planner that has pre-defined boxes, like an Erin Condren planner or anything that style, you can just follow the lines of the box in your planner and mask off all the surrounding areas and leave yourself that white space. And then you can go ahead and apply ink in whatever method you want into the middle, and then you'll have sort of a nice clean box. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I am just going to use this plain hexagon stamp. It's a solid image, so it'll give you a good idea here. And I'm going to use some Stampin' Up! Inks. And we're going to go ahead and stamp repeatedly all over the box in a pattern. I'm going to stamp here in that corner first. And when you're doing the edges, you want to make sure you're really giving some good pressure, because you want the ink to go right up next to that line so that you get like a nice crisp line on the edge there. And then I'll just switch up my colors here, and we'll make sort of a cool rainbowish design. And a tip that I would give when you are masking is to make sure, if you're leaving any white space, try not to leave too much white space along the edges. In this case, I'm going to fill the entire thing solid with stamped color, but I'll show you in another example. You really want a lot of stamping to overlap the edges, because that'll define your area and make it look like a nice crisp shape. So this application for the masking technique, I'm sort of calling like confining a pattern, if you will. So I'm going to create a pattern, albeit a little bit imperfect here, but I am going to create a pattern with this hexagon stamp, and I'm not hovering right over my page, so I'm not lining these up perfectly, but you're going to get the idea, and it's still going to look really cool. And I'm going to just repeatedly stamp throughout this box. I'm just varying my colors as I go here. Get a pleasing arrangement. This is something that I do often, and I combine the two techniques. I use the stamping off or second generation technique in addition to this, so that I use varying strengths of the color, and you end up with like sort of a tone on tone pattern in the background. So let me just finish this up real quick. So I've covered my whole area, and then this is where the really like the beauty of the masking happens. Oh wow, these shadows are pretty bad, aren't they? I'm sorry, guys. But when you peel this back, you get such a crisp, confined looking line. It almost looks like, here, let me leave some bright there. It almost looks like a full box sticker. So if you're going for that look, but you don't have stickers, you don't want to invest in them, or you don't have something that matches your project, this is a really great way to achieve that look. And you could do this with any different type of stamp. You can do it with solid images like this. You can do it with words running across. It's just a really cool way to get a confined shape. So let me just show you another application. So if we took the same Post-it notes and we lined them up alongside one another, and I'm eyeballing this, so this isn't perfect, but you could get a T-ruler or follow grid lines on a mat, but I'm leaving just a strip exposed here. And now if I do the same thing and I just go along and stamp, and in this case you're not even going to notice that this is a hexagon because you're just getting like the middle of it, but you'll see I'm gonna get a cool look. I'm just going to alternate my colors. Oh, I didn't ink that stamp really well, but that's okay. Use my pink, my orange, and my yellow. Okay. So in that case, when I peel these off, it's almost going to look like a washi tape. So you could, like, if you don't have a sticker set, look at how cool that matches. And it doesn't look, you know, obviously this doesn't look like hexagons, but you clearly have all of the same ink colors represented and sort of the same scale represented. And that would just be really pretty and complementary on your planner page. And that would be really pretty as a header or to divide up your pages into sections, if that's something that you're looking to do. Okay, for my last example, I have a piece of paper here. This isn't even masking paper, but if I were home and in my craft room, that's what I would use. And you could just punch out any sort of shape, a circle, or you could die cut any shape that you have. If you have a die cutting machine, but leaving a void here so you can see there's a circle in my page. And I'm just going to put that on my page, and just to secure it a little bit, I'm going to tape it down a little with these Post-it notes just so it doesn't shift. But it does not need to be sticky on the back as long as you keep it in place. And now for this, just for a little different look, I'm using a word stamp. This is a tiny little word that says party. I think this comes from a Studio L2E set, but I'm going to repeatedly stamp that word throughout, and making sure, this is the example I was talking about before, I want to make sure that I cover these edges as much as possible and overlap the edges, because then when I remove this, I'm going to get a crisp looking circle. Another tip I would say is, if you are using any words, make sure to stagger the words, but also make sure that at some point in your image you can read the word pretty well, so that if it's a longer word, you've got some examples where you can read it pretty well. So I'm just zooming this into fast forward while I stamp this repeatedly. I'm being very careful to make sure that I overlap all the edges of the circle, even when it seems like hardly any of the stamp is going to show, like you'll see on the tippy top here. I'm going to do one up there, even just the bottoms of those A's and R's. That's all that's going to show in there, but it's important to do it. You want it to seem like this pattern continues beyond the shape. And again, this is a tiny little corner. You're not even going to be able to read the word, but you definitely want it in there. And then when you peel this up, you end up with a really cool, very well-defined circle. And you can see all those edges. I want ink along all those edges so you get a really crisp, defined looking circle. So how cute would these three elements look on a page together? And you didn't have to have a coordinating set of stickers or anything like that, but you've got all of the same ink colors going on, and they would just complement each other really well. Okay, so the next thing that I use, another idea for masking, is when I only want to stamp a portion of a single image. So this isn't about repeating stamps and confining them into a shape. It is, you know, yes, I want to use this stamp, but I don't have space for all of it maybe, so I only want to use a portion of it, so I can mask some piece off. So in this case, I have a checklist with 7 lines. Let's just assume that on my page, I just don't have quite that much room. Maybe my columns are more narrow, or maybe I don't have the room or the need for 7 lines. Maybe I only need 3 lines of a checklist. Well, that doesn't mean that I can't use this stamp. All I have to do is put something down to cover up the area that I don't want stamped, and then ink up my stamp. And then if I only want 3 lines stamped, I look through from the top, because this is a nice photopolymer stamp, and I line up the 3 lines above the Post-it and the other lines below the Post-it, stamp it down, and then when I lift my Post-it up, then I've stamped only the 3 lines. So this is a great tool to get more mileage out of your stamps. I'll show you again. A lot of times, I'm going to clean that one off and switch over to this. Now this is just a 2-line checklist, and a lot of times what I do is when I'm using this full list, this one lines up perfectly along the side, and it gives me some boxes, like check boxes. It gives me a line on the left edge and then another line just in from the left edge, so that I create a little box to the left side. But if I'm only using 3 of the lines, I would take my Post-it and I would go all the way up to just underneath that last line that I stamped. And then I'm going to go ahead and ink up my stamp and line it up here. And then when I pull this away, you can see I've got 2 check boxes and my little lines. So it works out just perfectly. Another example of partial stamping is when you want to only stamp, again, sort of the same concept, when you only want to stamp a portion of the stamp at one time. So I have this stamp. This is an Amy Tangerine stamp, and it says Good Times. Now, you can cut this apart if you did not want the good times to stamp as is. You can cut this apart. I will get to that in other videos, so if you're not comfortable cutting your stamps, I'll address that in another video. But if you don't want to cut it apart, you can do partial stamping using masking. So again, I'm going to take the Post-it and stick it on my page. And again, notice I'm using these Post-its over and over. If you're using pigment ink, be careful, because if you're stamping over pigment ink and it's still wet, you could transfer some of that ink onto your stamp, or you could be smudging. I happen to be using dye ink. It's quick drying, so this is not smudging on me. But pay attention to that. Once it's dry, though, you can reuse these until they've lost their stick. So I use my Post-its over and over again. So I'm going to go ahead and ink up my whole image that says Good Times. And now these are pretty close together, so I do need to be careful about where I'm putting them, and I'm going to line them up. I'm not sticking my head in the frame, so I don't know if this is going to come out perfectly, but I'm going to stamp it down, and I'm going to try to get the word good on my project and the word times onto the Post-it. And I think I did it. That way, I can just use the word good as is, and then the times is not part of my. If I wanted to use this entire sentiment and have it say good times, but maybe I needed it to be lined up horizontally instead of stacked, well, then I would just take my Post-it and flip it over so that it's on the top side, and I would ink my stamp again, and I'm going to stamp it a second time, but this time I'm going to put the word good onto the Post-it and the word times onto my project. And again, I got to kind of line this up, so I'm sorry if I get into the screen. But now I have that stamped image in a line, and I've altered the original layout of the stamp, and I've just used my masking technique to do that. So for another variation on the masking technique, you can create a void within a stamped image using masking. So let me show you what I mean by that. I have a smaller hexagon here. This is a solid hexagon, and I'm going to stamp that onto a Post-it note. I'm not even going to stamp it at all on my paper, so just entirely on the Post-it note. And I'm just going to show you what I mean. Just the only thing you want to be aware of is that some portion of the stamped image is on the sticky part of the Post-it note. So if you have a full stick Post-it note, this is no problem. But if you have just a partial stick, like just the edge is sticky, then you want to make sure that some portion of this is on the sticky part. Then we're just going to cut this out, and I have to apologize again, you guys. It got even sunnier. Like, it was a little bit of a cloudy day, and it has gotten even sunnier. So my shadows are more pronounced, and I'm really sorry. I don't want to put out a poor quality video, but my choices are limited right now for where I can record, and I really want to get this content out to you guys. So let me know in the comments if this is really annoying. I can remake this video, and I can also, you know, just avoid doing this going forward because it might be more important to you that you just see it and you don't care about these shadows, but it also, you might say it's so distracting that I can't even pay attention. So please let me know. So now I'm taking a much larger hexagon, and this could be any shape whatsoever that you want to use, but I'm going to take a much larger solid image, and I've taken my little sticky note that I cut out, and I've just put it down on my page. So you can see that's just a little peeled sticky note. I've just stuck it down on my page. Now I can ink up a large solid image, and I can go right over the top of this, and I really want to give good pressure because I really want those edges to go right up next to my stamped little sticky note. And now I've got a stamped image, and I'm going to just use the corner of my scissors to try to grab that up. And then when I peel this off, I have a little void in the middle. So this could be, if you have concentric circle stamps or something like that, that could be where you write the details of an event. And then you know, the exterior is just like a cool border. There's all kinds of applications for what you would want to use that for, but just that's the concept of creating a void within your stamp, is to put some masking paper down within the stamped area, within the stamped shape or image, and then stamp on top of it, and then remove it and expose the white paper underneath. All right, the last technique or use for masking that I wanted to share today, and that's not to say there aren't more. Like I said, I'm sure you guys will come up with lots more cool ideas and ways that you can spin this, but one really common way, especially in other, like in scrapbooking and in card making circles, people use masking to create scenes and dimension. So when something is in front of something else, obviously the front image you're going to see the whole thing, but the back image is going to be partially obscured, right? And that's just how we see things in real life. So if you're trying to get that look on your page, then you need to use some masking techniques to get that effect. So let me show you what I'm talking about. This is like a tiny image of a computer. So I'm going to stamp that on my page. And if I wanted to create a little cluster of office products, like I have a cell phone and I have an envelope with some mail, and you know, I could make a little grouping of these, but if I stamp them on top of one another, obviously the lines are going to crisscross and it doesn't look very realistic, right? If I stamp everything just all next to each other in a row like this, it's cute, but it's not maybe quite as interesting, you know. So that would be a cute little collection. Can you see that? Guys see that okay? It would be a cute little collection of little office products, but maybe not quite as interesting as if you wanted to look like they were really grouped together. So to get the look of grouping, you want to stamp the image that's going to be in front first, because that's the one where you see the whole thing. Then you need to stamp the same image on some masking paper or on a post-it. And again, you want to do it on the sticky edge of the post-it. So I'm going to do that right along this corner. And then you're going to cut this out. Here. Okay, can you see that okay? So here is my stamped image of the computer. And then here is the one that I stamped on the post-it paper, and I just want to line those up right on top of each other and cover my original stamped image. Okay, then I can go on either side of that, and first I'll do this envelope image. So I'm going to stamp up the envelope, and I can overlap it on that one side. And then I can use the little cell phone image and overlap it on the other side. So some of my stamping is going on the masking paper and some is going on my project. Now when I peel up, if I can use my fingernail to peel up the masking paper, see if I can get that really close on screen. Now my little grouping appears to be kind of three-dimensional. I've got the computer in the front, and then the tablet or whatever it would be behind there on the one side, and the envelope on the other side. So it looks like a cute little scene. Now these are the three stamps that I happen to have that would kind of make sense, but if you're using little animal stamps and you're creating, you know, a couple of little animals on a little grassy area, that's where this really starts to come to life. I know a lot of us, you know, just kind of stick with functional stamps or more, I don't know, more task-oriented stamps in our planner, which is why I happen to grab these. But again, the same principle applies, where if you mask the foremost image and then you stamp the other images on top of the mask, then it'll look like those images are tucked behind the one that's in front. So it's another cool masking technique to create a little scene. So there's lots of other fun things that you can do with masking. Those are a couple of ideas to get you started. I would say probably the most practical and simplest place to start if you've never done any masking before is to take a couple of Post-it notes and mask off a box in your planner and just stamp over the top of it, and you'll come up with some really great results. I think you'll be thrilled with the life and the fun and the color that can add to your planner. And then, you know, again, something like this, if you happen to have a punch, that's pretty easy. Creating some faux washi tape by lining up masking paper in a long line is pretty easy. Simple techniques to take your stamping to the next level, and I hope you guys have some fun playing around with that. I will try to get to part 3 in this series sometime this month. Please be patient as I'm doing all my packing and in the midst of my move, but hope you guys are still enjoying this. And as always, I appreciate you being here with me. Give me a thumbs up if you like the video, subscribe to see more, and we'll see you soon.